and have an official meeting of the X.org Foundation Board of Directors. As Secretary of the X.org Foundation, I hereby call this meeting to order. Anybody got any orders? Let's see. In terms of business, I think the first item of business. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Excellent. I'll introduce myself. Introduce us all again. I did this morning, but you're right. Twice would be better. So for those of you who don't know, present at the meeting today are Stuart Kreitman, who is our treasurer, Alan Coopersmith, myself, Bart Massey, who is the secretary, Keith Packard, Eric Anholt, Matthias Hopf, and Matt Dew. Not able to be with us today was Alex Duscher, whose name I'm sure I just butchered. You only meet people online. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to say to people like you, welcome. Thank you very much for attending. We couldn't be happier to have, people old and new here today. Thanks. It's a great suggestion. So I think one of the main agenda items that we wanted to take care of today, this being a public board meeting and all, is that the next election cycle is coming up. The bylaws are somewhat specific about election cycles, and this is one of the things we need to amend about the bylaws, but the current policy of the board is that the elections will typically be held in January of each year. The election process, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is that every year 4 new members are voted, four members' positions come up. So each board member serves a 2-year term, and it's staggered so that half of them are up at any one time. And the election process is by membership in the X.org Foundation. If you are not, anyone in this room who is not an X.org Foundation member, we strongly encourage you to become an X.org member. The cost is 0. The effort is near 0. You have to go online and fill out a small form. Probably the biggest effort is finding a time when our web infrastructure is up. We're working on that. But assuming that the web's up, you can just get online and fill out a small form, explain why what you're doing is relevant to the X Window system, and there you are. We're more than happy to have you. We need to keep our membership up for a couple of reasons. One of them is that now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, the IRS will be, the U.S. Internal Revenue Service will be watching to see that we actually have a membership, and so it's important. The other thing is that quorum for various things is difficult, so we need active members as opposed to the other kind. So that little commercial pitch aside, in January we will presumably be electing 4 members of the X.org Foundation board. The way that process works is that the members who are not up for re-election will be the election committee for purposes of executing the election. So let's see if we can figure out. I know that I am up for re-election on this cycle. Yeah, woohoo. Oh, well, yeah, I don't normally participate anymore anyway. So, yeah. So who else is up for re-election this cycle? Alan is. I think Stuart, you're still first year. Is this your second year? If it's your second year, then it's you and Alex. Okay. So.
Yeah, I think you and I are on opposite years.
All right. Well, we'll check all this obviously offline. But for now, the reason that it's relevant today for this meeting is we need to select a chair of the election committee. The chair of the election committee is responsible for being the chief person to take election-related shit. They also are encouraged to ride other people so that the elections actually happen in a timely fashion and are organized properly. Given that attractive job description, do we have anyone who's willing to be nominated as chair of the election committee? All right. All right. So I'll move that. Well, I'll move on behalf of the election of the board that I guess the election committee really needs to vote this one themselves. So I'll ask the members of the election committee who are present. We happen to have a quorum. All in favor of selecting Eric Hanhold as the election committee chair? I have an aye from Kreitman, an aye from Packard, and an aye from, yeah. And Anholt is willing to say aye, I assume. So yeah, there we go. So we now have a chair, which is Anholt. All right, so the charge to the election committee from the board is that you figure out what you're doing, set a date with schedules. Fortunately, Carl Worth a while ago gave an actual checklist. Eric, you've seen that, right? And oh, you wrote it. Sorry, my apologies. Well, thanks to both of you. Sorry about that. So there is a checklist, which is yours. I assume you can find it and follow it. All right, good. Yeah. Well, there's that too. Yeah, thank goodness you're. Yeah. Well, I knew you'd done the software. Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah. All right. So I think that takes care of the election-related business, unless anybody has any other points to raise there. All right. There is pending a motion, a request for travel reimbursement, but I think we've agreed to table that and discuss it offline at a future, well, not offline, but discuss it at a future meeting for a couple reasons. So I think that's done for today. Does anybody have any other new business that we should discuss today? So. Yeah, right.
Presumably people are staying in their hotels and don't have their hotel bills yet. Well,
yeah, so.
Are there any expenses for the conference you need the board to reimburse? Or, I mean, Susie's covering our room.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Right.
Well, if that doesn't have to be paid during the week, then we can,
all right.
we can discuss that.
So yeah, financial situation around XDC and reimbursements, et cetera, is good. We had the treasurer's report earlier in the day, so we know what our financial situation is roughly.
We want to discuss.
Well, I plan to make a more detailed report of year-to-date. More detailed report of the year-to-date and of 2011, so people can get a sense of the process. I have all my numbers. I haven't massaged them in a while. That's my excuse. I'm sticking with it.
So yeah, actually, the bylaws require both the secretary and the treasurer to prepare a report at the end of the fiscal year. The treasurer is supposed to prepare a treasurer's report and deliver it, and I'm supposed to prepare a state of the organization report. So, yeah, by the end of the year. So yeah, you've got plenty of time, but we'll look for the more detailed information then.
If I remember the bylaws, it's within 60 days of December 31st.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So Alan points out that's within 60 days. No, the other side. So you have.
You don't know what we're going to spend between now and December yet.
Right.
But I do need to have the format to let go.
Yeah.
So I have this number of people who are brought in give reimbursements, and I announce them, and no one has piped up that they're off, that they didn't appear on the list.
Yeah. So I think we're good there.
You know, mentioned about fundraising, or?
Well, given that we had the discussion earlier, I think, so. I guess the question I'd have for the board real quick is, I made some statements earlier about fundraising and a couple other things. I mean, if anybody had any disagreement or wanted to clarify any of that, I would love to hear it. We did have a little bit more of a discussion about fundraising and sources a little earlier, a few of us, and I think, the important thing is that I think we're agreed as a board that we're at about where we want to be for a reserve. We have at current burn rates about 1.5 to 2 years reserve, which is pretty close to where I'd kind of like to be. So I think our goal for the fundraising is to, balance year for year and have the current money as a reserve fund as quickly as we can.
So in fundraising, most corporations are going to be interested in having a specific thing that they're raising funds for. So for instance, I can imagine it being very easy to go to Google and say, we're having the X.org Foundation runs a continuous education program called EDOC. Would you like to sponsor that to the tune of blah, blah, blah dollars this next year and have your name on it? I can imagine they would think that was fabulous, and it was like, we won't be participating in GSOC because we have our own program. If you'd like to help fund that, that would be awesome. And I can imagine that would be very easy to take to Google, for instance. Similarly, this conference has travel sponsorship requirements. It'd be very easy to take that to a number of other corporations and sponsor the travel, student travel to the XDC and that kind of stuff. So we need to have, most corporations don't want to just give you a pile of money for a slush fund, but they're very interested in having their name attached to a particular activity. So I think if we have numbers from the last 3 or 4 years about what we were spending and a budget for those, it'd be really easy to go out and get people's names on particular items. And we really only have 2 things. We have EVOC and we have travel sponsorship for conferences.
Yeah, a bit of infrastructure, a bit of post-sprint. But, you know, that said, I would like to try to see if we can raise some small percentage of that as just permanent discretionary income. I agree with you that, you know, we might be able to get the bulk of it in that way, but it would also be nice to have some just plain old money coming in. You know, if nothing else, yeah. So, I mean, this is what we have to figure out. And so once we have good detailed budget numbers, I think all of us on the board will be called upon at some time or another during the next year to talk to somebody about, you know, financial stuff. So, yeah. That's pretty much what I think there is to say about that.
Speaking of spending money, do you know anything about the MIT hosting?
I know that we are still spending money on it? I assume we are. I haven't.
We were supposed to stop that. I thought we took all these machines out of MIT.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we did.
I think we told them, well, we're done with them and we don't want them because they're now 7-year-old.
Excellent. I have not seen any bills from MIT. I assume they'd either gotten redirected to you or. Excellent.
No, I just remember the board, we voted to kill the MIT host. We don't know who did it.
So for those, I think it might have been Ajax. So for those who aren't familiar, we should, for the larger audience, point out that for the last long time, with the assistance of then Sun Microsystems, we've had machines on the East Coast at MIT when we've paid hosting fees every year for a long time for those MIT machines. Yeah, and more recently we moved all of our X.org infrastructure to Portland State University, where we're not paying hosting fees, and almost all. Yeah.
Our current hosting infrastructure is split between PSU and the OSU open source laboratories.
Yeah, but that's within the last 3 months or something.
No, a year ago.
Oh, was it a year ago?
Yeah. So we have hosting at 2 sites. So we have redundant services and backup and that kind of stuff, and in multiple sites. Yeah, the redundancy at OSU OSL is strictly in terms of DNS infrastructure and mailing list stuff, which is easy to fall back on. We have a new sysadmin on board in the last week or so. I'm going to work with him to see if we can't get some fallback web service as well, so that when the web server goes down, we can have a backup that does something.
Like a heat-only version.
That puts up a lovely whale and, you know. Yeah, something.
Something. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that maybe not everybody here would understand, is that our infrastructure is joint with freedesktop.org, the X.org Foundation, and freedesktop.org. Gosh, that was a hard sentence. Freedesktop.org cooperate on infrastructure stuff, and that cooperation, you know, means that we get the same, you know, we share that infrastructure and save on costs and everything else. So it's a good arrangement for everybody. So the point is that we at this point, all of our infrastructure is on the West Coast and, you know, in Oregon, and so that's what's going on with the MIT machines and that sort of thing. It's probably notice paper in the anyway. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if something comes bad enough to affect 2 sites 100 miles apart, probably the least of our worries are X.org infrastructure. And thank goodness for Git, which means that We won't lose the repos no matter what happens.
I won't care.
Yeah, exactly. All
Anything
right.
else?
Any other business? All right. With that, I will move to adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor? Okay. Carried by common assent. Thank you all.